We live in a world where approval is currency. From the moment we're born, we're taught to perform, smile for the relatives, behave for the teachers, achieve for the parents, fit in with the crowd. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, we become addicted to pleasing others. We don't just want to be liked, we need it. It becomes our compass. We begin to shape our words, our choices, even our identities around what will earn us praise, avoid rejection, or keep the peace. But here's the truth that no one tells us until it's too late. You'll never be free until you stop pleasing others. Because every time you betray yourself to win the approval of someone else, you don't just lose a piece of your time or energy, you lose a piece of your soul. There's a philosophical illusion that underlies people-pleasing. The belief that if we can just be good enough, agreeable enough, needed enough, we'll finally be safe. Safe from rejection, safe from conflict, safe from being alone. But this safety is a lie. It's a cage made of praise. The more we please others, the more we depend on them for our sense of worth. And that dependency is the opposite of freedom. It means our inner world is always subject to someone else's mood, opinion, or validation. It's like handing over the remote control of your life to another person and hoping they'll press the right buttons. But what happens when they don't? What happens when the person you've been bending over backwards to please still disapproves of you, still doesn't see your worth? If your identity is built on their approval, then their rejection isn't just painful, it's existential.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Think about your own life. How many times have you said yes when your body screamed no? How often have you smiled when you wanted to cry, apologized when you weren't wrong, supported someone who never supported you back? And why? Because you didn't want to be seen as difficult. Because you didn't want to lose love. Because deep down, you were afraid that if you showed your true self, you wouldn't be accepted. But here's the paradox. The more you hide your real self to please others, the more invisible you become. People don't fall in love with masks. They fall in love with presence, with truth, with someone who dares to be exactly who they are. And yet we keep editing ourselves, shrinking ourselves, polishing ourselves into something more palatable, only to wonder why we feel empty, unseen, and resentful. From a philosophical perspective, this is a crisis of authenticity. Jean Paul Sartre, the existentialist, warned us about bad faith, the act of lying to ourselves to avoid the responsibility of freedom. And people-pleasing is one of the most seductive forms of bad faith. It tells us that we're being kind, selfless, even noble. But often, it's not kindness, it's fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of being alone, fear of being truly known. And that fear slowly eats away at our freedom until we don't even know what we want anymore. We only know what others want from us. Ask yourself, when was the last time you made a decision purely for you, without factoring in how it would affect everyone else's opinion of you? If you can't remember, you're not alone, but you're also not free. Freedom, real freedom, begins the moment we stop outsourcing our self-worth. It begins when we realize that no amount of approval will ever be enough if we're not aligned with ourselves. It begins when we stop asking, "What will they think?" and start asking, "What do I know to be true?" It begins when we accept that not everyone will like us, and that's not a failure, it's a filter. It begins when we understand that trying to please everyone guarantees one thing: we'll please no one, not even ourselves. So I'll ask you this: who are you still trying to impress? Whose opinion are you still chasing like a ghost? And what would your life look like if you stopped? The prison of approval. Why seeking validation is the enemy of inner peace. There's a hidden cost to living your life for the applause of others. It doesn't just make you anxious. It doesn't just exhaust you. It fractures your soul. Because every time you say what you think someone wants to hear, instead of what you truly believe, you split from your center. Every time you act in a way that wins praise but contradicts your deeper values, you reinforce a false self. And over time, that false self becomes a mask you forget you're wearing. This is the real prison of approval. It convinces you that the mask is your identity, that the performance is your personality. And the longer you wear that mask, the harder it becomes to remove it without fear of collapse. You forget what your own voice sounds like. You forget what it feels like to live without the pressure to impress. But beneath that mask, your real self waits, quiet, buried, and aching to be free. The most dangerous part of seeking validation is that it works temporarily. You say the right thing, and someone smiles. You post the right picture, and someone clicks like. You suppress your needs, and someone praises your selflessness. And for a moment, you feel loved. But it's not love, it's approval. And approval is fleeting. It fades the moment someone's attention shifts elsewhere. That's why it becomes addictive. You need more and more of it just to feel okay. You become a shapeshifter, adjusting who you are to avoid friction, criticism, or rejection. And every time you do that, you reinforce the belief that your real self isn't enough, that you must earn your place by being useful, agreeable, impressive. But what if your worth didn't need to be earned? What if you didn't need to be liked to belong? What kind of peace would that bring you? There's a profound philosophical truth at play here. When you need others to validate your existence, you are never truly alive on your own terms. You become reactive, not creative. You live in response to others' expectations, not in alignment with your own essence. The Stoics warned us about this centuries ago. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because real growth means being willing to disappoint the crowd, to break the mold, to choose authenticity over admiration. And that's terrifying, because the ego craves applause, but the soul craves truth. And truth often comes with silence, solitude, and the risk of being misunderstood. Ask yourself, would you rather be admired for who you're not or ignored for who you truly are? That's the price of peace, giving up the chase for approval and daring to live your truth. But let's go deeper. Why do we seek this validation in the first place? It's not just insecurity, it's survival instinct. As children, we needed approval to stay safe, to be fed, to be loved. If we upset the adults, the tribe, the system, we feared abandonment. And many of us carry that same fear into adulthood, even if we're no longer conscious of it. People-pleasing becomes a survival strategy, but it's one that outlives its usefulness. What kept us safe as children keeps us stuck as adults. And unless we consciously break that pattern, we spend our entire lives trying to win a love that no longer needs to be earned. So here's the uncomfortable truth. You are no longer a child. You do not need to be pleasing to be loved. You do not need to be perfect to belong. You do not need to perform to be safe. You are already worthy, already whole. But until you believe that, you'll keep living like a puppet, waiting for someone else to pull the strings. The sacred no, how setting boundaries liberates the self. Saying no might be the most spiritual act you'll ever perform, not because it's defiant, but because it's defiant. Every time you say no to something that violates your values, drains your energy, or distorts your truth, you're saying yes to yourself. That is the essence of freedom, not the ability to do whatever you want, but the courage to not do what you don't want. And yet, we hesitate. We swallow our discomfort. We agree to things that twist our insides into knots. Why? Because we fear the consequences. We fear being labeled selfish, cold, ungrateful, arrogant. But here's the deeper question. Why is protecting your energy seen as selfish? Why is honoring your truth framed as arrogance? The answer is rooted in a culture that rewards compliance and punishes authenticity. A culture that teaches us to please others before we've ever learned to respect ourselves. Boundaries are not walls. They are the architecture of a healthy self. They tell the world where you end and where someone else begins. They are declarations of self-respect, not acts of aggression. But for many of us, especially those conditioned to earn love through self-sacrifice, boundaries feel like betrayal. We think we're hurting someone by asserting a need, declining an invitation, or walking away from toxicity. But in truth, we're only betraying ourselves when we don't. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant emphasize the importance of autonomy, our right and responsibility to treat ourselves and others as ends in themselves, not as means to an end. When you people please, you become a means. You reduce yourself to a function in someone else's story. And the moment you do that, your life stops being your own. There is a sacredness to the word no when it comes from a place of alignment. It's not said in anger. It's not reactive. It's not meant to punish. It's simply a statement of truth. This does not serve me. This does not reflect who I am. This does not belong in my story. And when you begin to say no with clarity and compassion, something remarkable happens. You stop attracting people who only value you when you're useful. You stop living in fear of conflict. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never built for your authenticity. Saying no doesn't close doors. It opens the right ones. It's a filter that clarifies your life, that lets the real connections rise to the surface. Those who love you not for what you do for them, but for who you are when you're not performing. Think about the times in your life when you said yes out of fear. The job you took because it looked good on paper, even though it crushed your spirit. The relationship you stayed in because you didn't want to be alone, even though it hollowed you out. The obligations you kept fulfilling because you didn't want to be seen as unreliable, even though they left you burnt out. Each of those yesies was a no to something deeper. And the terrifying part is that we often don't realize the cost until years have passed, until the resentment settles in, until the fatigue becomes chronic, until the quiet voice inside us, the one we ignored for so long, starts to scream. So I'll ask you, what are you currently saying yes to that is actually a no in your soul? And what would happen if, just once, you honored that no? The moment you embrace your boundaries, you step into your true power. Not power over others, but power with yourself. You become sovereign. You become trustworthy to your own soul. And that changes everything. Because when you know you will no longer abandon yourself for approval, for peace, or for applause, you become unshakable. People may still criticize you. They may leave. They may gossip. But none of that will have the same grip on your nervous system. Why? Because you'll know the truth. You have your own back. You are no longer negotiating your worth in the marketplace of other people's opinions. You are standing whole, grounded, and free. And that freedom isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's a quiet knowing, a deep breath, a life lived in alignment. And it all begins with one word: no. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. If any part of this video made you uncomfortable, sit with that. That discomfort might be the boundary you've never set. That silence you feel inside, that's your truth waiting for a voice. And if you're ready to stop living from integrity, then ask yourself one final question. What would my life look like if I stopped trying to be liked and started trying to be real?